Okay, so I'm Tom Fennery from Chronology, Sociology and Social Policy. Have the immense privilege really to be Sebastian's host for this week and to welcome him from Denmark. He arrived yesterday. Sebastian is a professor at the Danish School of Education, University of Aarhus. Although you're at the Copenhagen campus, aren't you? Right, University of Aarhus. I've known about Sebastian's work for quite some years. He has a PhD from the University of Copenhagen, and really I came to know his work through his really prolific outputs based on his research, ethnographic research, fascinating, challenging, amazing ethnographic research with young Danish and Scandinavian tourists in Sunny Beach, resort in Bulgaria. And the thing that interests me about Sebastian's work is it's so theoretically sophisticated and it's very methodologically rich. It's also, I think there's some bond here because my PhD was on stag party tourism in Eastern Europe. So we've both gone through this thing of researching something that is on the face of it very pleasurable, people getting drunk, having a good time, but trying to make sense of that and the problems and the challenges involved. Sebastian's going to talk today, and I will let him take over and talk to you about this, the pursuit of collective effervescence, and some of it draws on this excellent book from 2023. This is my copy, don't take it away, but I'll leave it on the table if anyone wants to have a browse of it. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to add. Alongside the work on intoxication, Sebastian's currently working on a fascinating sounding project about the experiences and motivations of Scandinavian volunteers fighting in the Ukraine Russian war. He's here for the whole week, and there'll be to ask some questions today and talk to him after lunch as well. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to IAS for hosting, and most of all, thank you to Sebastian for making the journey out to Loughborough. And we'll just welcome you and greet you and say thank you for coming.
Yes. Thank you so much. It's a real fun and pleasure to be here. And I'm going to talk about a topic that has preoccupied me for a long time, which is why people gather for events like these. Across the world, we see people who come together and pump up the energies, be it at sport events or politics or nightlife or religious settings. So that's the big question for me. Yes. And I'm going to draw on Durkheim's theory of collective effervescence to try and explain why it is that we collect these human bodies together in the same place and pump up the energies. I'm going to tell you a bit what that is and how we create these shared moods. And also I'm trying to present a typology of types of effervescence, because I'm going to argue there's not just one type, but there are different varieties of this. But before we dive into the theory, just some pictures to give you an idea what I'm talking about. I like this picture a lot. If you notice the disappointed faces in the background and the very eager ones in the front with the alcohol being served. So we live in a culture in Denmark and England where alcohol is kind of in the center of these events. It doesn't have to be, of course. We can have these emotions collectively without alcohol being part of it, but that's what we gather around often here in England and in my country, Denmark. This is something we see throughout history. This is from 1559, the carnival. Again, people coming together, making fun of the authorities and making fools of themselves collectively and getting drunk and having fun in the process. This is a corroboree, which is Emil Durkheim, the sociologist. He drew a lot of data from this and got inspiration from these rituals. So here we see a bunch of guys. I don't know why the photographer took out the women, because the women were part of these celebrations. But maybe these guys kind of insisted, is my theory, take a picture of us. But it's basically a lot of the same things going on. People come together and dance, sing, and fool around. So we have it. And this is from the Notting Hill Carnival. I suppose it's an English ritual, maybe. I'm not sure what's happening here, but again, what's happening is, and I will repeat this a couple of times, people come together, are physically together, this is key. They focus on the same thing, they become aware that they're focusing on the same thing, and then the magic might happen. We have collective effervescence. So this is what I'm writing about in this book that Tom kindly mentioned before, where I kind of draw data from Sunny Beach and Golden Sand and these nightlife resorts and places around Denmark where people go to festivals and so on, and use the theory to kind of shed light on that, and then use the data to refine the theory, because it does have some holes, it does have some things that we have to fill in. I'll come with some suggestions how to do that. Because the theory, and I'm going to, what is this thing? So basically it means like heightened states of intersubjectivity, or ecstasy, if you like. But there's more into it than just this. And Marcel Mauss was one of the people who wrote about this first in this book about the Inuit. And and he's French, so he's not defining exactly what it means, but it's something that happens when the Inuit, they come together during a certain season of the year. So they are dispersed normally, they live scattered and collect food and so on, have boring lives, but then they come together for festivities, and then effervescence happens. So he mentioned this in this book. And then we have the big work on this back in history, Emile Durkheim, but there was a lot of people writing about this at this time around Durkheim. So it's not only Durkheim, we credit him, but Mauss is also key here. And here he mentions it, but again, I'm half French, so I can say this. There's no clear definition of what effervescence means. So I've tried to put up with my own definition. I'm being a bit unfair to Durkheim, but it's for the sake of the story also. He had some speeches where he defined it more clearly, where he was confronted, what do you mean this? It's a cornerstone in his theory. But we lack this, clear definition. So I've tried to formulate that in the book. Define it as an altered state, like altered state of consciousness, an altered state of heightened intersubjectivity, marked by intense transgressive and then yet mutually attuned action and emotions among individuals who gather in the same place. So I think this is kind of important, people being together. Now people are using the concept to understand gaming and understand things where people are not in the same place. And it might be really good and fruitful to do that. But I'm of the school who think that the full-blown thing, where it really, where you can really feel it and you feel at one with the crowd, is when you're physically together. So gaming, people can feel excited, people can feel something close to effervescence, but I don't think it's the full-blown thing, because we have human bodies that are tuned into receiving signals from each other through smell, reading faces, and so on. And this bombardment of stimuli we can get when we are together in the same place. When it's online, there's a delay, we can't smell each other, we can't touch each other. So I think we might get something akin to effervescence online, but not the full-blown thing. So that's my position. But new studies are coming up on this, and this is the big area for the psychologists and the sociologists and what have you to study. Can we have it without being co-present? But I belong to this old school of saying we do need to be present to have the whole thing. So I think we can unpack the concept. And here I go back a bit to Durkheim himself. Randall Collins has made a theory in interaction ritual theories where he kind of simplifies things a bit. And this is hugely influential book that is being used, but the concept has been relaunched. but I think we can kind of unpack it into these 5 basic elements. So in order for effervescence to be there, we need these 5 elements. So first of all, unity, the sense of connection between people. That's the most important thing by far. So without unity, without a sense of connection, without a sense of mutuality, without the flow of emotions between people, there's no effervescence. So it's not like networking. We go to a party in order to network, to get something out of it from other people. We unite in order to unite, and then we get rewarded by it. And maybe this is because we're kind of wired for this, that as human beings, we survive when we're connected, when we're with a crowd out in the jungle. If we're alone facing the lion or whatever, we can't do it. But when we're together and we chant together or scream at the lion, we can survive. So maybe that's why we have these emotional rewards from connecting, perhaps. And without the connection, as in the COVID situation, depression, anxiety arose, and so on. So this is important for us humans. And so I dwell a bit with this unity because it's really the key here. It's not just solo excitement when you get an award, you get it from an email, and you're like, yeah, it's not effervescence. You need the connection, right? And part of the argument here, and this is Randall Collins saying this also, Durkheim, and I think there's a lot of evidence from this now, that effervescence is something we need as fundamentally that we need sleep, shelter, and these basic things. We need this human connection. Anyway, intensity is also part of this experience, that we can experience things and we can do things that we can't do on our own. So when we kind of feel encouraged by the crowd, but we also feel emboldened by it. We feel maybe a sense of anonymity when we're surrounded by a big sea of people and do stuff that we would never be able to do. And then you get the transgression. Typically in nightlife, it's just minor things like saying things that are vulgar or opening up to a friend in a bar and saying stuff you wouldn't normally say. But transgression will be part of this experience, which is also why it's not only a good thing, because we know that sexual violence is very widespread in nightlife settings and sports events where there are many people gathered and so on. And so the transgression can become a dark transgression, the dark flow of events where one thing leads to another, and then people regret it afterwards, or people get harmed. So it's part of it. But usually when you have nightlife situations, it's the minor transgressions where people think it's fun, and afterward they have a really good story about it, and feel good about it, and that they're doing stuff that they don't normally do. Symbolization is also an element here where the collective energies get pumped into symbols, and the symbols can be whatever. It can be you're in a church, you sing together, you focus on the crucifix, and then the crucifix will get some of the energies from the crowd. So like a little bit like a battery, the symbol, the crucifix in this example, will contain some of the energies. So it can be anything. It can be a piece of cloth, like a flag for soldiers. It can be an autograph from your favorite pop singer, or pictures from an event. Something that can kind of set you in contact with the crowd that created the effervescence. Durkheim writes that without being pumped into symbols, we would lose the feeling. We forget about it because feelings are fleeting. So we have this memory of how wonderful, how magic it was at this event. But we can't truly connect with it. Whereas when we have a symbol, the crucifix, the swastika, the flag, we get in touch with it, or the yellow jersey from a pub crawl that you won, you take it out with your friends, and then you reconnect with the event through the symbol. So symbols are key. And then Durkheim writes that, this is, again, it's important for us to have these moments of effervescence. We feel revitalized. we feel a sense of purpose in life. Of course, when we're talking nightlife, there's also often hangovers the day after, so it's not only good things, but often even when you interview people who have hangovers, they might feel miserably physically, but they're laughing a lot. There's this sense of, if it's a really good event that they've been through, a sense of purpose in life. So again, effervescence is we need it in some kind of arena in order to get by. So how is effervescence created? Here I take the super influential model from Collins' book Interaction Ritual Chains, a fantastic masterpiece, I would say. I don't know if you're acquainted with this sociological book, but this is kind of his key model for explaining interaction rituals. So here on the left side, you have the causes of effervescence. So you have to be co-present. You have to have a sense of barriers to outsiders. You have to have a mutual focus of attention, such as focusing on the superstar or focusing on the dancing. And then you become aware that you're focusing on the same thing. And then the magic happens. So and then it becomes this feedback loop where there's a shared mood. And then you have effervescence happening, which then leads to, in the longer run, to group solidarity, emotional energy being this sense of purpose in life and determination, and that's an individual feeling. So you are at the party and you leave, if it's a good event, then you have emotional energy in the body that makes you want to continue and find the next good party, a next good avenue for experiencing effervescence. You get symbols out of it and sense of reality. So this is a super useful model that is being used all over, right? For studying politics, sports, and so on. And I think, and maybe Collins would agree, that we shouldn't take it too rigidly. For example, barrier to outsiders. Is it really necessary for people to experience effervescence to have a sense of us, them? In a lot of rituals, there is, like the Nuremberg rallies with the Nazis, you name it. In many celebrations also, that there are us, the cool people, and the non-cool people. So a sense of we and barrier. But if you take a hippie party or many raves, there's not a sense. If you ask people about this like the more the merrier. Come in. There's also some studies of mega churches in the US where it's like they just want more people to come. So there isn't this divide. It's not necessary. And this is just one example that I think where we can see we need to adjust the model to the empirical stuff that we're working with, and not just holding on to it too dogmatically. And in Collins' later writings, this thing about barriers to outsiders also fell out of his writing. So I suppose he's also come to this conclusion himself. So when we look at nightlife, I should say that six ingredients or causes, if you like, are necessary for people to experience effervescence. So if you look at sports events or soldiering, it's different. But when we talk about nightlife, so it's a little bit of an expansion of Collins' ideas here. So first of all, it's a good idea if people come prepared. Studies of raves, for example, show that when you come for a rave party the first time, it's sometimes, for many, difficult to really connect with what's happening. It's impressive, it's overwhelming, and maybe you feel a little bit marginalized by all these other people who are having fun, and you can't really get into it. And then the second time, you know what's coming, and then it helps. So being prepared for what's coming is important, and this can happen also through talk, of course, that you hear about how you're supposed in Ibiza or how you're supposed to feel and so on. A sense of security or confidence in what's happening. So if you go to an event and you're met where you go to this party and you see all these bikers selling drugs standing looking around with menacing looks on their faces. I've tried that. Then you're not gonna let go and experience these and contribute to the mood and help each other pump up the mood, because your body is kind of filled with anxiety or uncomfortable because it is transgressive states. It is wild in a sense. It doesn't have to be, but often is. So in order to let yourself go, you need some friends around, or you need to know somebody will capture me if things go awry. So you need to be willing to let go. The third one, and then co-presence. Again, as Colin says, I think it's super important to be physically together. And then how many? Studies of mega churches has shown that the effervescence gets higher the more people you are, up to a certain level. But you can be two people and experience effervescence. Two people having a conversation, two friends or a small group of friends, you have an interaction and you have this situation where you become rhythmically entrained into what's happening. One friend knows what the speaker is going to say and takes over the sentence. And then you have this sense of connection right there. So it need not be these huge crowds. It can also be just two people. But for it to be really intense, probably we need a bigger crowd. But the connection and all these elements I talked about before can come in small gatherings. Quant psychological studies have also indicated this. So this is focusing on the same object activity. We're dancing, we're focusing on it. We become aware of ourselves as a group is important. So if you have a shopping mall situation, loads of people, everybody walking around, looking into their phones, focusing on different things, there's no group feeling. It's just a crowd. You feel the intensity, it's buzzing, it's maybe annoying, but it's not, there's no connection. So you need that focus, common focus, and becoming aware of it. And then physiological stimulants can help the process, and is key in Northern European nightlife settings where drinking is typically used, and it can facilitate the process for us. So letting go is easier when you are intoxicated with alcohol, for example. You more easily get into the mood. But then you can also have music as a universal technology used in this situation, dancing, lights, and so forth. So this is just to exemplify that, you know, whatever you're working on, and if you're going with the Durkheim tradition, I think it makes sense to kind of not only go with the basic Collins model, but be empirically sensitive and see what is the data saying here, because it might not be only these 4 ingredients that we saw in the model before. So effervescence in Durkheim's book is he has 2 types. He has recreative effervescence. People come together and then they confirm the status quo. They gather around the same symbols that they have already created before, and then they just pump them up with renewed energy, and people continue believing in those symbols and moral standards and so on. And then you have creative effervescence, where people will invent new stuff. French Revolution, lots of gatherings, and new ideas came up. So new symbols came up, new ideas, new moralities, and so on. So there are 2 types. So already back then, critics said, well, surely across different types of gatherings, there must be different types of effervescence. But Durkheim didn't really answer other than these 2 types. And this has been a problem ever since, I should say, that even in Collins' work, we have effervescence, we have low levels and high levels, and that's it. Now, a book is coming out and chapters coming out where he talks about musical effervescence and other stuff. But this is new. So based on nightlife data, I think it makes sense to distinguish between these types. If you're studying sports, soldiering, again, other types might be there, but I think these types are pretty basic for a lot of gatherings where we have high levels of effervescence. So the most important in my data, being these young people going to sunny beach and festivals and so on, this is a drunken one, which is there's connection. Drunken people do feel connection. I know that the cliche might be that people are just in their own drunken bubble, but it's not true. And when you talk with people and you see their body language, people feel connected up to a certain point of drunkenness where it kind of falls apart. But there's a lot of touching and there's a lot of connection in drunkenness. And this is the most typical point, or the type of effervescence in nightlife settings when we're talking about Danish people, and I bet English people as well. So this is clumsy effervescence. People move and say things that are a bit clumsy. Maybe carnivalesque would be one characteristic of this a little bit. We have the psychedelic variant, Goa trance parties, typically with psychedelic drugs, but not necessarily, where it's not so much, it's not particularly clumsy, and it's not behavioral, the transgressions in these states, it's more in the mind. You see things that are mind-blowing, you hear voices and things are happening that are unusual. And this thing about psychedelic effervescence is that co-presence is often part of the ritual, but maybe here co-presence is perhaps not that important, that people will feel connected when they're on their own. They take ayahuasca together and then they maybe go outside by themselves and they feel connected with animals, trees, other humans, people who are not there. But the connection, if it's effervescence, the connection has to be there. But maybe the co-presence element here is not super important, although many psychedelic rituals start with a community, be it ayahuasca ritual or the Goa trance party. There is a community typically. Melodramatic effervescence is perhaps more rare, definitely more rare than the drunken one. It's where people make theatrical scenes. They pump up the energies through throwing out dares to each other. Kiss the police officer. You don't dare doing that. And then they create these dramas. And there's quite a bit of that if you look at it in nightlife settings. People, show your buttocks to this crowd or these kind of things, and then the emotions run really high. And it's not centered necessarily on drinking, but often it is, or psychedelic drugs, but it's some other dynamics. I think it's a separate type. Violent effervescence being where there's a lot of tension, fear involved. And yes, there can be, connection through violence. So if we have group violence, obviously there's a strong sense of in-group love and community in the violent situations when we look at hooligans and so on. Lots of connection there. And there's also, I think, I don't have that much data on this, but some kind of perverted connection between people fighting with each other. So they act across purposes, but there's, when talking with victims, the sense of being, imposed with another human being that kind of sullies you or invades you. And so there is some kind of effervescence and unity in violent situation, even when it's not a group fight. I've seen sometimes also, so this is drunken fights, people who fight and then are connected afterwards, like men. So that there's a fight between strangers, and then afterwards that you can see them up in the bars holding arms and like holding each other. It's not that I've seen it a lot of times, but I've seen it quite a few times, and I'm thinking, yes, connection, some kind of mutual recognition can be part of this. Compassionate effervescence, sexual effervescence resemble each other. In the rave scene, we have cuddle puddles where people hold each other after an event and connect. It's not sexual, but there's a connection, love and friendship, feelings circulate, and sexual effervescence, then the sexual act and the connection that comes through that. And that can also be measured, for people using like breath is synchronized and so forth, or it might be synchronized, and nervous systems kind of are in sync. And I'm speaking a little bit slower here because I don't know too much about it, but I've read a bit. And this can also happen in conversations where there's a syncing of breath and nervous systems. Yeah, so these types, I think with these types, we can do more exact empirical investigation instead of just saying collective effervescence happened and then measure that, but be more specific about, well, what type of effervescence is it here? And often when you have a big event, of course, a festival or a nightclub, there'll be more different types happening all at once. So it's not that you have no effervescence, people come in, the mood builds, and then you have drunken effervescence for all and everyone. There will be somebody there who feels, psychedelic effervescence. Maybe he's just taking some mushrooms and then he comes in there and he feels the energy and the connection, but it's more the psychedelic variant, not the drunken one. Or you have a football match where, drunkenness builds up and it turns into violence. So you have drunkenness and violent effervescence happening. So, but with these concepts, we can be more precise if you can follow me in explaining how is the experience, how does it feel like for people to be there and what's happening. So I'm just going back to the model here. So for Collins, who is maybe, he's a microsociologist and a little bit into rational choice and positivism. He's very interested in cause and effect and predicting behavior, explaining all sorts of behavior with this, where I'm very interested in this small thing in the middle, collective effervescence. And this is my more phenomenological orientation, that I'm really interested in how do people feel in their bodies, how do they feel with each other in these moments. So the typology can help us dig more into this experience per se, if you know what I mean. So of course it's super cool to predict behavior and explain it. This is why it's a full-blown theory here. But being descriptive about the experience itself, I think, is also super important as a supplement here. So this is an example of a dark form of effervescence. And of course, when we study these things, often it will be about class differences. It's the attack on Capitol Hill in 2020. It will be about macro level things, about historical developments, about discursive clashes, about elites fighting for overpower. And the kind of approach that I've talked about here will take us more down on micro level and try to explain these events as dynamics happening in a crowd. So we have a speech by the guru or the leader, the charismatic leader, Trump in the beginning, who incites the crowd to go down to Capitol Hill. We have a violent elite who are there, prepared with weapons and everything. And then all of a sudden, people feel overtaken by this collective power and suddenly find themselves bashing windows and attacking this monument, this building, in spite of themselves. So of course there were violent elite who were prepared for this and who went and had planned it for a long time, prepared for it. But there were also people who just were overtaken by the effervescence of the situation and then, caught up in behaviors that they later had difficulties recognizing. So this is dark effervescence. And if we want to be more specific, probably we could find psychedelic elements, people without drugs being in a state of psychedelic, seeing psychedelic visions and being like mind-blowing in a psychedelic sense, drunken effervescence, and of course lots of violent effervescence here. But for that we need interviews with people, and I haven't gone into that. I think Colin somewhere mentions also the situation where we have a lot of co-presence outside. People are, bundled together with high density, and then those who get into the building in these huge rooms, there's the bodies are removed from one another. If you've seen video footage of it, you can also see the mood kind of lowers as soon as they get into this building. Maybe because there's less co-presence or less density. So the possibilities of emotions circulating between bodies is hampered. And the mood gets a bit down. You have one guy yelling a bit, and you have there's a significant lowering of the mood, which again suggests body to body dynamics is important. So I finished with this more pleasant picture of effervescence in a club where this is what it's about, and this is a key aim. So when people go out, and this is part of the argument here, what they want, it's not drunkenness, as you can sometimes read in the media, that young people, they go out to get drunk and do silly stuff. I think it's more accurate to say that they go out to connect with each other. And when you interview them, they will kind of confirm, we go out to meet people, we go out to be with friends and so on. And that's the key, to be together, focus on the same thing, and immerse yourself in the collective energies. And it can happen at very spectacular big events, but also in smaller, bar settings, pub settings where we get compassionate effervescence, and maybe not as intense, but definitely the connection. And I think that's the key. So we have different competing concepts for this. Oceanic experience, Freud has used that term, and people have also used that, or calculated hedonism, or edge work, and determined drunkenness, and so on. And all of those are super good also, and can do different things for our analysis. But I think collective effervescence and the apparatus around that is more sophisticated for studying group intoxication at a political event, or in nightlife, or in sports events. Yeah. So thank you. That was my talk, and I guess we can take questions also from online. And people can write in the chat, and if you have questions, I'd love to hear them.
Well, Sébastien, a round of applause.